Evan, welcome to the Z Learning Podcast. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Will.
My pleasure. So, Evan, as a recruiter in the world of tech, what kind of skills are most sought after by technology companies in today's market?
I'd say that right now it's definitely a very engineering centric market. I've never, like, in my 10 or so years doing this, which feels super weird to say out loud, I don't think I've seen salaries so high. It's just like it's definitely a candidate's market. Super competitive, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I think it just means that companies need to tighten up their processes. But in terms of general skill set, I definitely say engineering probably seems to be like some of the most popular in demand skill sets. I know sometimes like terms are overused. I know some of my actual dev friends like hate this term called full stack, which just kind of means like a combo of front end and back end engineering. Because I think a lot of people just like slap that on their resume.
It's become one of those cliche buzzwords.
It has.
Yeah, it's like, oh, another full stack developer. Yeah.
And a lot of people really aren't that. They're mainly front end or mainly back end, but they realize like, hey, this is what I need to put on my resume for people to actually reach out to me. But I definitely say engineering. Of course, depending on what sector you're in, I think DevOps is really big. I think that's like a very in demand skill set that's kind of very niche, but if you have that experience in like CI/CD pipeline, all that kind of fun stuff, you can definitely demand a pretty penny, to say the least.
Is it niche or niche?
I don't know.
That's a whole conversation for a whole nother podcast
episode. This reminds me of, like, not to digress too much, but I just saw like an old Conan clip of what's the one from Jennifer Gardner from Alias, right? And it was her correcting Conan, and then like she's like, Conan, you went to Harvard, you should know better. And then in typical Conan fashion, he got one of his assistants to pull out the dictionary, and he was like, I was right.
I've seen that. That is classic.
So I don't know. We'll have to look it up after the show.
Yes, everyone do your research. Okay, so Evan, in your opinion, obviously remote, having with the pandemic and more people shifting to doing remote work, how has it shifted the way that we recruit, hire, and onboard new employees?
I think it's completely shifted the way we do this. I feel like I've been like overusing this term recently. Oh, it's such a big paradigm shift. But it really is though. I think that before, companies use it as kind of like a carrot to be like, oh, if you've been here like a year and you're doing really well, maybe we'll give you 1 day a week. And I think truly, like, the paradigm shift was now companies are realizing that people have been really happy working from home. It's like better work-life balance. Personally, I've definitely found myself working like more hours in the past, because it is obviously like harder to separate that out.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, not as much recently, but in previous companies, during like the heart of the pandemic, I'd say I was working like crazy hour days because you don't really unplug, right? Like, even if I'm on my free time, I'm still watching Netflix on my computer. I'm still like playing video games here. But I definitely say that I think people are realizing that it's just kind of nice to have the availability. I mean, before, like, for instance, I was working at a company where, I live in Washington, D.C., and I was doing like probably an hour 15, hour and a half commute each way into Virginia. And it's not the worst, but it's like, and obviously it's a pretty big chunk of time out of your day each day of the week. So there are certain things you can't really do, and it makes it more difficult to run errands during the day when stuff's open, or if you have a dog to do that. For people who have kids, there's like childcare stuff that's difficult. So I think people have appreciated that there's more autonomy, and that, like, depending on, how your company operates and what your job is. Like, for instance, the other day, like I took a 40-minute gym break in the middle of the day that I'd kind of scheduled, right? Other times I'm like, oh man, I got to do all these like boring adult errands, got to go to UPS, got to do like really boring stuff. But it like, I can actually do it during the day.
How is
Whereas
the UPS the highlight of my day?
that would be so sad if that were the highlight of my
It really
day.
would be.
Yeah, but I think because candidates have been, I don't want to say spoiled. I think that's the wrong word. It's too strong of a word. But I think because now they're able to see what an ideal work-life balance would actually be like. And now that it's more employee centric than employer centric, at least at the moment, I think that, again, for these in-demand roles like engineering, DevOps roles, et cetera, yeah, I think people are able to kind of pick what they want. And so as a response, companies have had to become more competitive with, a couple of days, at least a couple of days per week. Or I know a lot of companies have flexed to kind of a hybrid schedule, which,
Yeah, actually, so one thing I wanted to get in with you into is that, you say that it's an employee's market, it's a candidate's market, it's employee centric. And, I myself, I've worked from home for years, and like people used to think that was weird and make fun of me. And then everyone started doing it, and we're like, how do I use Zoom? And it's like, it's fun. It's interesting to see how more people have adjusted to that or leaned into it. So my question for you would be, during this time that's been termed the Great Resignation, when many people are changing jobs and it's a candidates market, so to speak, how can tech companies stay competitive in terms of both attracting and retaining top talent during this time, this really competitive time when so many people are leaving their jobs for new places?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, and it's something it's something that I deal with on a daily basis. Like literally, just at the end of the day yesterday, we had a candidate decline because we just couldn't offer them what another company could, and that's fine. Like I'm happy for the guy. Awesome dude. Hopefully our paths will cross again. I think the onus is definitely on the companies now to, like I was saying, be more competitive. So whether that's really looking at salary like across the country, and there are a bunch of good resources for that. Like I know some of the more popular platforms is like Pave and Payscale, and I don't know if Carta does it too, but there are a couple of other ones as well where pretty much like you can look at a ton of like aggregate data points across the country. You can break it up by like higher paying areas like San Francisco, New York, DC, et cetera, or just like across the country, or you can look at it overall. And I think that you can look at like what is truly a competitive salary, because I think a lot of times some hiring managers at companies I work for really are trying to, if you're trying to get someone that can easily make 115 at like a median level, and you're asking for 80K to get this person, that you're not going to find good talent. And if you do find good talent, they'll quickly realize that they're underpaid. And, 6 months later, you have to fill that position again. So it's kind of wasting everyone's time and resources, knowledge management, et cetera. So I think from a salary perspective, for sure, you have to be competitive, like, and in terms of, benefits, in terms of, what you're offering candidates. I don't want to go too much on a tangent, but me working in the startup space right now, I really appreciate that, startups offer, a lot of startups in this space offer equity. I feel like, the old movie Office Space, right? Like the running joke is the guy said, if I work 80 hours a week, to paraphrase, if I work 80 hours a week and the company ships a couple extra units and they make a ton of money off of it, what does that mean for me personally? Nothing really. There's no direct influence on you. Whereas you're essentially betting on the company doing well. So you are truly incentivized to like put your all into what you're doing. Now, who knows how many hours a week that comes out to, but like, I think that is something that should be looked into in more organizations. I know Obviously, bigger companies like Google have made that kind of a very consistent thing for those top, those really top level positions that I mentioned, like specifically for engineers, for DevOps, for a lot of the higher level like program manager positions. Like they really do give a lot of stock options to those people because it's an incentive to stay, especially if there's like a longer vesting period. Anyway, not to digress.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. So you mentioned two, I would call financial incentives. Obviously, better salary. I think I read a statistic somewhere. You can tell me if I'm wrong. That after like 3 years of working somewhere, on average, you're gonna make more money by changing jobs than by getting a raise.
By
Some people do
doing,
not. I've shared that before and got
yeah,
attacked for it. So I don't know if that's true.
by
But
doing zero research on my side, I agree with you.
yeah,
No, I mean, I've kind of personally done the same where, I mean, if you're getting, let's say you're just getting like the typical increase, like you're just doing well and you're getting the typical increase of like 5% a year. I mean, yes, like a lot of times there are opportunities to jump ship where you could make double what you're making, or something to that effect. So, I mean, it really depends on the opportunity. And I think it's always interesting to me where there's this kind of like awkward dance between companies and people, applying to jobs where it's like, you're expected to say, well, money's not everything, because it truly isn't. But at the end of the day, you want to be fairly compensated
right,
and you want to be able to live comfortably, right?
right.
So it's not everything, but the underlying thing that is not discussed is that it is important. So I think that that's definitely a factor, but I don't think it's the only factor. I think that longevity in a job, I think people want to see that. I know in my company, kind of what we do as soon as someone's hired, like as soon as they go through formal onboarding and meet a lot of the team, we kind of put together, depending on which specific segment of the company they're in, we put together a plan that can say, okay, let's say you're going to come on at this junior role. Like, how do you get to a mid or senior version of this? How do you get to a managerial role? How do you get to even potentially like a director or VP level as well? Right.
Right.
And, there's a very specific plan of like, in X amount of time, you hit A, B, and C things, and we'll make sure that you get there. So I think that that's really what people want, because a lot of times, and I've seen this in companies that are 20 people, that are 20,000 people. Sometimes they really don't have the best career path where, yeah, I mean, you'll get like a decent salary, but this is what you'll do for however many years you stay here. And there's really no room for advancement. And that's a huge turnoff to candidates because, like you said, they can just go to another company, potentially make more money and get that title bump and have more room to grow.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I want to get into. You mentioned before two financial reasons. One's like the obvious salary, having paying people a good competitive salary. The other one you said is maybe giving them equity, so they have a little more of a vested interest, a little more skin in the game. But what you just mentioned now about career paths, I once read, I don't remember where, that the number one non-financial reason why people leave their jobs is because they don't see a pathway to growth in their current organization. They don't see a future with their current employer. And my question to you would be, how important is it that a company provide resources that enable employees to upskill or discover and transition to new career paths within the organization, or take ownership over their own kind of like professional learning and development?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super important. I think that, yeah, I know I think you touched upon a couple of really important points there. I mean, I think that if you really want people to stay for the long term, and typically, I think for most roles, it's easier to retain people, and I mean, financially, it's financially better to retain people for the long term rather than to, like I mentioned, start the process again. But I think in terms of learning and development, I think companies should invest more. I feel like it's a sporadic benefit that some companies have, whether that's hey, maybe we'll give you like $2,500 reimbursement for courses or for certifications, whatever it may be for. I think that that's a bigger push that companies should have. It's not my wheelhouse at all to know like the tax breaks, and I know certain companies can potentially like write some of that off or get money back if they're giving those kind of incentives. I don't know enough about that to like dive into it, but I think that should be pushed for more, whether that's like an IT person getting their, security plus or something along those lines, whether it's a basic certificate that will like help you, grow in your role and can potentially lead to other roles, if not in that company, then in other companies. But I think just in general, that should be a bigger push. Like, I think we really should be building up from within. And I feel like that's what a lot of companies say to lure people in. And then unfortunately, the disillusion hits after someone's been at a company for 6+ months when they realize this isn't the position that you told me about, and there really aren't those opportunities for advancement.
Right.
And I think there's a way to, like, I know a lot of companies that I've seen in the past do it in a way that's like mutually equitable for the company, in the sense of, okay, you paid $5,000 for me to go get my MBA, something like that. There's typically a clause that says like, you have to be with us for 12 months
Sure.
unless there's some extenuating circumstance, right? So that way the company gets to retain that talent, and then that way that person feels like they're personally growing, and also feels like, hey, if for whatever reason it doesn't work out with this company, I have this on my resume that makes me more valuable.
Right, exactly, because it's investing in the growth of your employees, and which is also investing in your own organization. You're cultivating the talent, and that would make sense that for a company, we all heard the platitudes of preaching, like we like to hire from within, but
Exactly.
promote from within, whatever. But I totally think it's reasonable that you're investing in your talent. You want them to bring their new skills and education to better the organization, and then it really works for both. So that's really interesting. Um, you were also talking about onboarding, and just to make a kind of an analogy, a lot of salespeople complain when they do a great job with the customer, they bring them in, and then they get passed along to customer service, who screws it up. I wonder, as a recruiter, who's sort of like in a certain way in sales, you bring someone in, um, what and I like what happens if like the onboarding, they do the training or whatever and they quickly bounce. Like, how could we make, or is there an opportunity there? Are we losing people? Like, how can we make the onboarding more effective, especially when it's remote? And how can we, I guess, make our organization stickier?
Hmm. It's definitely an interesting question. I'd say a tough one to navigate. In terms of onboarding, I know that something that HR likes to do are exit interviews. So let's say that, I hired you for my company, for Bigeye, and after like, you're 2 week, you're ramping up. It's only your first 2 weeks, and then you're like, you know what? I don't think this is for me for whatever reason. We do try to have, a bit of a formal exit interview, just to see like, hey, like, where did we have some missteps? Like, kind of where did we miss the mark? And sometimes we get valuable feedback where it's like, man, it took a while for someone to respond, or, the questions that the things that I was told during the interview process, they don't seem to be the case here. Or sometimes, a lot, I'd say more often than not, it's just like, oh, hey, Facebook offered me 3 times what you can offer me,
Right.
and I was interviewing with them, and then they, it took them several months, but they finally got back to me. So I do think exit interviews are helpful for that. I think, building rapport with that candidate in the first place, so you feel comfortable enough to ask those uncomfortable questions, I think is important. The candidate actually I just mentioned to you before, that unfortunately, passed on working for my company, gave me really valuable feedback in terms of like how we can explain to him. Actually, it's funny you mentioned sales guys. He's an account executive, so pretty much trying to get in accounts, trying to get new customers onto the Big Eye platform. And something that he mentioned was, that this other company essentially told him, hey, here are some specific accounts we have set up for you that we think based on your skill set, you'll be a great fit for. Now, I think the company was blowing a little smoke because, they can't really guarantee those accounts for him. But I think, it was helpful advice, the undertone of what he had said in terms of like, make sure that you're tailoring something for me and for my skill set and like the industries that I've worked in before. So that's something we've kind of kept in mind, and we're kind of reworking a small part of the process to kind of make candidates more comfortable in that sense. So yeah, I mean, I think onboarding is super important. Kind of, I know what we do as a company is we definitely try to, I mean, we're also a smaller org. Like we just hit, 50, I was employee number 20. We just hit 52 recently, which is definitely exciting. But we definitely try to get, like if you were, again, if you were to join the org, we definitely try to get you to chat with like a good number of people in the company. Definitely all across the board in leadership, both of our co-founders, probably like, let's say our director of engineering, head of product, head of, marketing and demand gen. So really try to, have you at least have one-on-ones with most of leadership, even if you're not in a role that's like directly involved with them. It's just, it really is good to put a face to a name, and it's just kind of good to get you in front of those people. And then, obviously have you have pretty detailed conversations with the people that you'll be interacting with on the day-to-day, as well as your team. But we also bake some of that into the interview process, right? Like we want to make sure that people you'll be reporting to or working with, that you will directly interview with them. We want to make sure that they feel like you're a fit, and then you feel like they're a fit, because I can say from personal experience, if you don't like your direct team, it's not going to be a fun working environment. So we try to get that out of the way early, but we also try to, like I said, during the ramp up period, try to make sure that we are allowing you to see into the entire company. And I think it's important for companies. I mean, for any part in the process, even if someone's been with the company for years, there has to be a level of openness. There has to be a level of allowing people to be inquisitive. I hate working at places where questions are kind of frowned upon, where it's like, why are you asking this difficult question? We don't have, we don't have an answer. Whereas
How dare you question us?
yeah, exactly. Whereas, so at my current company, every Tuesday we have a company-wide all hands where it's the entire company joins a Zoom meeting, and it's kind of nice that on one, it's just a level of transparency and respect that I think a lot of people want, and I think it should be a basic thing. But we dive into the health of the company every week. It's like we have X amount of millions of dollars of runway left. We can for the next X amount of years, we can operate at our current headcount, at our current budget. It's just good to see that. And then also, hey, here are some deals we have in the pipeline. Here are some big names we just won, like, big customers like Instacart or Udacity, or actually Zoom, is one of our customers. So it's cool to see all of this, and it makes me feel more comfortable with how the company is doing. And again, gives insight into stuff that I don't get to see on a day-to-day basis, because that is not my part of the team. So I think all of those things in tandem lead to people wanting to stay and to want to stay for the long term.
Well, I think, it kind of makes people feel like they're part of something bigger and they're really part of it. It's not just siloed off. Like, I wonder what they're talking about in there. Like, what's going on? Where are we at? Where's our job? Makes also you feel a little more safe, and like, you're not like wondering or in the dark if your job's in jeopardy or the health of the organization. And,
Yep.
you know,
I will. Yeah, actually, just to quickly touch upon what you said. I mean, I talked to a lot of candidates that have recently laid off. Like, obviously, there's a pretty big market turn down right now. And it's funny because as soon as I mentioned that, like, the transparency and going over each week, like how we're doing, they're like, I wish I had that, because literally every day up until they got fired, they get, oh, the company's great, we're doing so well, we have so much revenue, so much business coming in, and then they come into work on Monday and they're like, hey, sorry, we have to let everyone go. And like, you don't really want to be blindsided like that,
right.
ever. And I think that's a failure on the part of the company. I feel like I had something else to add, but I totally forgot. But
It'll probably come back. I mean, I'll say for me, I don't know. You can tell me when I add to this or whatever. Based on what you're telling me, it seems like the number one thing if you want to be the top things you should do as an organization if you want to attract or retain talent during the Great Resignation is pay people a reasonable salary that's like competitive, and give them equity if possible. Be transparent upfront with them, create a kind of sense of community, and invest in their growth, their own and their learning and development. I mean, I guess it's more than just having a ping pong table in the break room, right?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And actually, thank you. You actually sparked what I was going to say. So, you talked about like community. I mean, so, like my company before the pandemic had always been a remote first company. So, with that in mind, I mean, we pretty much have people across the entire continental US, right? So, our CTO is in San Francisco, our CEO is in New York. So, like, there's already a 3-hour time difference built in. So, I think we're, well equipped to handle, any kind of time differences in meetings and calls and whatever we need to do. But it does beg the question of like, okay, you don't really get to meet your coworkers. I mean, a handful of people, fortunately, like live in the same area, whether in New York or in San Francisco. And we do have, like kind of essentially a little WeWork office in San Francisco for anyone who wants to come in. A few of the engineers and data scientists do. Most people don't, but it does beg the question, like, outside of calls and meetings or occasional Slack messages, like, sending a random gift to someone you like how do you stay in contact? How do you like, get to know the person?
There's no like talking at the water cooler.
Which is funny because I remember I feel like that was something that like when the pandemic first hit, that a lot of like the executives at a lot of companies were kind of bemoaning of like, oh, there's no water cooler talk. And it's like, I don't know. Like, I think that for certain teams that there is a certain level of like camaraderie and like truly working together, especially if you're on like a UI or a design team or something like that. I totally get that and I agree. But for most teams, there's not like all of that talk. And a lot of it really is extraneous. Hey man, crazy weather, right? Okay,
How
cool.
about them commanders?
Yeah, exactly. But so I think that something that companies should do more of is we've like pretty much empowered a lot of our team leads to have like mini team offsites. Like my team, so my boss lives in Arizona. The other woman on my team lives in Philadelphia. So, we went to Philly a couple months ago and like we actually did a lot of work and got some like team building and team planning stuff done. But then we also kind of explored the city and like went around and,
I
got
was just there.
food.
What a cool little town that is. I really like Philly.
Philly, I'm a huge, yeah, I don't like the sports fans there,
No,
but
right. Yeah.
but like the city is awesome. And
Nice.
yeah, we went around like the like December holiday season. So it was all like, we went to like, it was like a super Christmas town kind of vibe to everything. It was
Oh,
cool.
wow.
And like, yeah, we just got like hot chocolates and some drinks and kind of went around. But
Philly
they
cheesesteaks.
yeah, we did get cheesesteaks. You got to get the cheesesteaks. And then we went to they visited me about a month ago in DC. So it's like stuff like that. I think empowering your teams where we really didn't spend a ton of money. Like most of the money was like we went to like some nicer like Jose Andres restaurants and stuff like that. But
Ooh,
yeah, not to
ritzy.
pretend like I'm not fancy. Yeah, so ritzy. So but I think having like small meetings like that and empowering your teams to do that, where it's like, as long as it's not incurring exorbitant costs, I think it's really helpful. We just had the
Yeah.
sales team meet out. Two of our sales guys are in Denver. And then, we've got some other folks across the country. So they all met in Denver and then they showed them their favorite places and they put together some really good stuff for the rest of this year into, the end of 2023 in terms of like, sales processes and stuff they really want to work on. And it's like, it's both helpful for the company and then also just like team camaraderie, right? Like you said, you don't want to be siloed off. Like I've worked at companies where it's like, I don't mind that no one like bothered me over the course of the day, but like you want to feel included in certain things, right?
Right.
So I think that really helps for that. But yeah, I think that's something that a lot of companies struggle with when people are 100% remote, and I don't think they've really found a good balance or answer for that yet.
Yeah. And I guess I have two last questions, and I guess I've always kind of fancied you as somewhat of a futurist, so I feel like you'll have thoughts on this.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
One is that obviously in person is back. I mean, yes, there are still COVID cases, but a lot of people are doing in person again. And how much do you think will go back, or do you think it will kind of always be a little more remote or hybrid because people have gotten used to that?
I do think that in the near term, I feel like for the next 2 years at least, I don't know. I feel like as a culture, as a community, we just have like a short-term memory. So I feel like we could easily like snap back in a couple of years. But I think for the near term, at least for the next 2 years, I think that like the Pandora's box has been opened. I think people are like, why would I waste all this time and money driving for 2 hours each way each day when I can work comfortably for the same amount or more
On the
money?
subway.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. So I do think right now that I think for the near future, and probably for a while, for the foreseeable future, I think at least hybrid work will be a thing. I think some companies, that can kind of throw their weight around a little more, like the JP Morgans of the world. Like I think that they can still probably demand people come in
yeah. I think
because,
Goldman Sachs was
yep.
like, "You don't show up, you're fired."
Yeah, I know those bigger companies, specifically in the financial space, were kind of saying stuff like that. But I think that companies that, I think, what wasn't it, Twitter a while ago, I think pretty much said like all of the employees can be 100% remote, I believe.
I don't think
Um,
anyone knows who their
well,
boss is
yeah,
there now, so
with the stuff
I'm
going on
really
with Elon
confused.
Musk, who knows? But
Yeah,
but in general, like I think that companies that that can't kind of throw their weight around like that, or
right.
I think that this will definitely be, I really hate saying the new norm, but I think it's like I think it's what people want. And I think, like I said, it is quality of life. Um, so that's kind of what I'm expecting.
Okay, and so and this podcast is a lot about the future of work and immersive learning, ed tech, e-learning, learning and development. I'm curious that, with immersive metaverse technology and AI on the rise, what do you and bigger organizations are already having like team meetings in the metaverse and having metaverse onboarding and stuff like that. What do you predict will be the future of work over the next few years? What do you think tech companies will look for in job candidates?
I could definitely see more meetings happening virtually, like you said, in the metaverse. It's funny. I just like maybe a couple of weeks ago read an article about. I can't remember what company it was offhand, but yeah, like you said, it's pretty much like a bunch of people in an actual meeting room in the metaverse, which is such a funny and weird concept. And sometimes it gives me flashbacks to that. I don't know if you ever seen
The
this movie
Sims.
Wally. Well, The Sims too. But you ever
Yeah,
seen Wally?
yeah, of course. We saw that together, I think. I
Did we?
think we did.
Wow. I don't, yeah, it's damn, that must have been forever ago. But yeah, like it gives me flashbacks to that. But I mean, I could see companies trying to adopt that. I think that companies will try out stuff like that. Like right now, I think the metaverse is like, it's a little bit of a joke, and
Yeah.
there's just certain things that are really weird about it, like that like approaches that uncanny valley kind of stuff, where it's like, why don't they have legs? Why does no one have legs? Like that's really
But as a gamer,
distance.
it must be kind of exciting for you to be like an avatar.
I mean, kind of. I haven't really played that many VR games yet. I've played a couple of like space ones. Like I've used the Oculus headset a couple of times. So yeah, it's kind of exciting. I think that companies will try out stuff like that for a while, and I think they'll find a better version of it than what it is now.
Right.
But I mean, that really could be something that potentially companies start adopting more. I it's just like at a certain point, it's just like, is it, would that almost make it more inconvenient if you're like, hey Bob, and you have to like be next to that person for the whole time? It's just like you're almost in the office. I don't know. It's interesting. I'm very curious to see like where we land on that. But yeah, I think companies could potentially switch to that, specifically in the tech space, where it's like people have the resources and the ability, to do that. So we'll see.
Definitely. Wow. Well, Evan, thank you so much. This has been really enlightening, and I think you provided a lot of value. My listeners are definitely much more aware of the current job market, especially in tech, and how to be more competitive as an organization and what to look for as an employee. Where could people find you, connect with you? learn
Yeah,
more?
find me on LinkedIn. Just Evan Francis. You can check out my company at bigeye.com. We work in data observability, data reliability. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Hopefully your listeners don't hate my super long-winded answers, but
Not at
you
all.
posed some interesting questions, so figured I'd kind of talk about it for a while.
Now let's close out with our best corporate laugh. All right. Take care. Bye
All
bye.
right, bye.